1968, year of wonders. There I was, almost 14, actually 14, going toward 15, about 100 pounds less than I am today, with a big swath of red hair sticking out in the front, and walking up the street, up past State Street to College Avenue, to walk on the campus of Franklin and Marshall College. I'm the son of a district attorney, and my mother at that time was chairman of the city committee of the Republican Party. I had just finished reading Up From Liberalism by William F. Buckley and other ideological works of that kind, and I was a true believer in that kind of Republican attitude of that era, the pre-Reagan era. So now I'm walking up to the campus. I walk past College Avenue onto the campus, and I go over a little hill and down onto the green sward or the green field where all the students are talking, meeting, congregating, debating about classes and about other issues, God knows what issues, of 1968. Now, if I went back 4 or 5 years, when I was a kid, I envied the students so much. I admired them so much. I would see them sitting in the library, Fackenthal Hall, and they'd have their yellow pads in front of them, and they'd be doing enormously, what I pictured as a child, as enormously deep researches in the card catalog, a dinosaur that no longer exists. And the guys would have their little College Joe tweed coats on. And it was only in that era, that 4 or 5 year period, that women first came to Franklin Marshall. It was still a boys' college until the early 60s. It was one of the 3 oldest colleges in the United States, according to its own self-representation. It had been established in the 18th century, and Franklin had given some money in its foundation, and that's how his name got into the college. And so it was, on American terms, a very ancient institution. Beautiful campus. Picture all the trees that President Spalding had put on campus from all over the world. It was like a great experiment in international tree collection, so there were beautiful shrubs and trees in every nook and corner. But I'm looking now at the students, and such a change in 5 years since I was 9 or 10. Now they look casual. There's a kind of erotic feeling in the place. The girls are underdressed. The guys are casual with a wrap around their head, a white wrap around their head, tie-dyed shirts. What in those days seemed like sloppy clothes, but there was a sensuality, there was a spontaneity about it, which we'd never seen before among college students, and very rarely among anybody. And Lancaster was a very prim, tight kind of community, full of Mennonites and Amishmen and Lutherans, and a fully moralized, orderly community. And nothing came with more difficulty to Lancaster, that ancient city on the pike from Philadelphia that was sometimes called the oldest inland city in the United States, although that's more of an advertisement than a reality. Suddenly I saw in front of me a new world. I saw American flags pasted or sewn on the posterior of blue jeans, which would have been so disrespectful 5 years earlier that no person on campus would have done it. I heard loud music sweeping over the atmosphere of the college. People are strange from the doors. People are strange when you're a stranger. women's faces come out of the rain when you're strange. And I was just struck by this atmosphere of mystery, this changed world where people had this new affect of liberty and of a kind of suggestiveness that I had never seen before in my life. And out of the windows of Hartman Hall came the Beatles' White Album, Piggies, back in the USSR, and one felt there was a world being created or being discovered which was entirely new. Now, I, of course, was very divided. I was a good boy. I was the young Republicans. I was then, and for many years after that, still holding on to a very conservative attitude about American politics and culture. It took me many, many years to realize the virtues of some of these more radical positions, and I've become much more mixed politically as I got older, which is one of the subjects of this little chat. 1968, year of the Democratic Convention, chaos, fires in large cities, San Francisco, riots all over the country, unspeakable disorder, and Vietnam War at its height, more than 1,000 soldiers killed that year. In the midst of the Tet Offensive, terrifying implications in everyday news, dead bodies being carried in body bags every day back to the airport in Washington. And there I was, 14, taking it all in. It was almost too much for the consciousness of an undeveloped adolescent. Now, why do I bring this up? If you went back 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 years before 68 to the late 50s, this world didn't exist. The revolution had not yet begun. The establishment had not yet established itself as the opposition to this inimical force of youth and to this new left, which was actively anti-war and pro-civil rights, and just on the crest of its new gender interest of equity for women, and cresting on a wave of exploring this liberty consciousness, which of course is a big part of the American culture, but which was now being re-examined. Well, when I think of that day and myself and the people I was observing and the conflict which I saw in front of me, I remember my father used to have to send over the policemen when they'd set a fire in Hartman Hall or when they'd threaten the dean in those years, 68, 69, 70. And my father would have to come over with Lieutenant Geezy or one of these, I can't remember all their names, but to see what the students were doing. And there'd always be this kind of unhappy discord between the town and the college. On one hand, I thought the people were despicable and, traitors or something like that. On the other hand, I admired them. I was internalizing the power of the music, this new ethos. And I really began to see something in watching the city council and the administration of the college and the mayor and all the people that were friends of my father and mother who were the political types. And I started to see in them some kind of dead letter sent out that could no longer be opened or read seriously. There was something going on where that old order of things just didn't quite seem plausible anymore. There was something had happened to produce an irony. And when I think of that day now, after all these years, 50 years have passed, I think that was the moment of the creation of the blue and the red. I know that it took much time in the Reagan Revolution and the oppositional parties and Newt Gingrich's government in the 90s and the Clinton era and all these and the wars in the Middle East, and all of this was part of the formula of change, and I know that I know it wasn't, but I'm not saying it was a simple moment but somehow a class of people, equity conscious of issues of justice, looking back at the errors of human history, the problems of the Reconstruction, the Civil War, all the way down to the time of the Voting Rights Act, which is only 3 years before this scene of me standing on campus in 1968. Something had happened that made possible this conflict that seems almost permanent in American culture, which we can schematize as the red and the blue. I'm going to say much more about this soon, but it's obvious to anyone that the red consciousness, the red state's world, is still the world of my conservatism of 1968, my conflict with these new ideas, my conflict with this new view of history, this new view of the challenge of history. And on the other hand, the blue world, which is based on grievances and perpetual theories of inequity, and a kind of and the groundwork of not only political correctness, but this thirst for a leveling of all of these things were in place at that moment. The conflict was there. I saw it right in front of me. I'm in a very different position now than I was then, and in the coming weeks I'll be saying much more about the meaning of this blue-red conflict.